Welcome to today's Explainer. I am beyond excited to dive into this one with you. Today we're unpacking the dramatic, honestly near fatal, but ultimately triumphant turnaround of an absolute global titan. We're talking about Lego. You know, for decades, those little plastic bricks have been a total staple in homes around the world. But what most people don't realize is that right around the dawn of the 21st century, the entire Lego empire almost collapsed. Completely. So, how does a company go from being universally loved to standing on the absolute brink of bankruptcy? And more importantly, how do they claw their way back to the very top of the toy industry? Let's find out. Okay, let's just jump right into it. $285 million. Take a second to process that. That is the staggering deficit Lego announced back in 2004. It was, without a doubt, the biggest loss in the company's entire history. The stakes here literally couldn't be higher. This wasn't just a bad quarter or a minor slump. This was a massive, flashing red warning sign that the company was bleeding out and actively facing the reality of bankruptcy. But to really understand how they reached this terrifying precipice, we have to rewind just a few years. What's truly alarming is the incredibly rapid descent that led to this point. Up until the early 90s, Lego was growing wildly, but then they started taking advice to broaden their clientele by imitating their rivals, and they stepped completely out of their wheelhouse. I mean, they ventured into uncharted, non-core territories like video games, clothing, and even jewelry for girls. Because their focus was so scattered, they posted their first ever deficit in 1998. The situation only worsened into the early 2000s as traditional toys started losing ground to digital games. By 2003, sales in Asia had plummeted by 28%, and the German market dropped by 20%. They were drowning in debt, totally disorganized, and quite literally falling apart. The turning point? The year 2004, when a new CEO, Jürgen Vig Kinstorp, was appointed.
So let's get into Section 1, back to basics, the turnaround strategy.
When Jürgen Vig Knudstorp stepped in, he realized right away that Lego didn't need to chase new trends to defuse this bankruptcy bomb. They needed to get back to what made them great in the first place. Let's briefly flash back to the company's origins. Over here, we have Ole Kirk Christensen, a carpenter who founded the company in 1932, originally making simple, incredibly high-quality wooden toys. And then you see the mid-century transition to those iconic plastic bricks. The company had always been rooted in enduring quality. In fact, the very first modern plastic bricks from 1958 can actually still lock in perfectly with a Lego brick manufactured today. Knudstorp realized they had basically abandoned this incredible pedigree and desperately needed to return to it.
And the secret was actually hiding right there in the brand's identity all along. The name Lego comes from combining the Danish words leg godt, which literally translates to play well. Coincidentally, and kind of beautifully, in Latin, Lego translates to I put together. Plus, their motto since 1936 has been, the best isn't good enough. These words really represent the soul of the company. Knudstorp knew that stripping away all the excess and returning to this core identity, high-quality, interconnected building blocks, was literally their only way out of the dark.
To actually execute this massive return to their roots, Knudstorp used a structured 4 Ps turnaround framework. For product, they regrouped around those core building blocks. For price, they had to stabilize sales immediately, which meant slashing product quotes by 30% just to clear out inventory and restore their competitiveness. For place, they leaned hard into direct and online sales, while making the really tough choice to close certain factories to cut excess capacity. And finally, for promotion, they leaned heavily into emotional storytelling and IP co-branding. Let's look a little closer at the product and promotion aspects, because they are truly fascinating. Looking at that product umbrella, Lego made some really bold, decisive cuts. They completely halted that extreme diversification. Literally, no more trying to be a clothing or jewelry brand. Instead, they took a hard look at their classic toys. In 2004, they successfully relaunched the Duplo series, which actually had previously failed. They also began heavily segmenting their core market, creating specialized products tailored to specific skill levels and demographics. They recognized that a master builder requires a totally different experience than a toddler. By abandoning the distractions, the classic bricks came back to life and quite literally saved the company. Which brings us to Section 2, the power of storytelling. Because, look, having a great product just isn't enough if people don't actually care about it. And what's really interesting here is the timing of their pivot. Right in the middle of their darkest hour, spanning 1999 to 2000, Lego launched the Bionicle series. This was an absolute turning point.
Bionicle wasn't just a box of random parts, it came with this rich, profound lore and vivid characters that resonated super deeply with consumer emotions. It gave kids a real reason to invest emotionally in the toys. This storytelling strategy was so incredibly effective that it pushed LEGO into the top 5 American toy companies for the very first time, providing a vital lifeline during their biggest struggles. This strategy rapidly spread like wildfire into massive IP co-branding. We're talking partnerships with absolute giants like Star Wars and Harry Potter. This allowed fans to manually build their favorite cinematic scenes, which only deepened their emotional bond with the brand. And they didn't stop at physical toys. The 2014 release of the Lego Movie was a total masterstroke of content marketing. It had a profound, exciting story entirely built around their own product. The result? An incredible 14% sales increase the very year the film was released, and a massive 25% increase the following year. Just phenomenal. Moving on to Section 3, Bricks in the Real World, the Maersk ship. Now, to see exactly how this high-level product strategy translates into real, tangible brick design, let's look at the real-world Emma Maersk. This is one of the largest container ships on the entire planet. Just to give you a sense of scale, this single ship can hold 12,000 20-foot containers. If you filled it with fruit, that's like 525 million bananas in a single trip. I mean, its anchor alone weighs 29 tons, which is roughly the same as 5 adult African elephants. So, I have to ask you, how in the world do you turn a 12,000 container Leviathan into a desktop toy? How do you possibly capture the sheer scale and the essence of this engineering marvel using little plastic bricks? Well, this was the exact design challenge placed right in front of LEGO designer Henrik Anderson back in 2002 and 2003. It actually started as just a fun side project for his shelf, but it quickly became a very serious, highly detailed LEGO model. Henrik's journey to build this model was full of some pretty unique hurdles. First, he somehow managed to squeeze 40 micro-containers onto the model, even though his colleagues kept asking if he really needed that many. But the absolute hardest part, the color. That iconic light Maersk blue was not a traditional LEGO color at all. Henrik actually had to go down to a local hobby shop to custom mix paint just to hand paint the very first prototype. But here's the crazy part. Miraculously, when it came time for actual production, they discovered 9 tons of the exact right light blue plastic granulate just sitting in storage. This allowed them to produce the first limited edition run, and that specific blue was then permanently added back into the LEGO range exclusively for Maersk models. It's just a perfect example of truly dedicated, customer-focused product design.
All right, bringing us to Section 4, the rebuilt empire and the new playbook.
Combining this meticulous product design with brilliant storytelling led to a truly breathtaking financial triumph. Over here, we remember those dark days of 2004, a $285 million loss, bleeding cash and staring bankruptcy right in the face. But fast forward just under a decade to 2013. The company didn't just survive, they absolutely thrived. Revenue hit 3.4 billion euros with an astonishing pre-tax operating profit margin of 33%. In just 8 years, their revenue had officially tripled. LEGO had successfully reclaimed its throne as an undisputed giant in the toy manufacturing industry. So, what is the ultimate takeaway here? What's the modern playbook we can learn from LEGO's survival? Well, first, cohere around your core classic products. Know what you're good at. Second, meticulously segment your audience to meet specific consumer needs. Third, lean heavily into immersive storytelling to create a true emotional moat. Fourth, remain agile. You've got to cut prices when you need to clear inventory, raise them as raw materials demands, and tightly control your supply chain. Fifth, expand to an omni-channel approach, balancing traditional retail with robust direct and online sales. But the final point is perhaps the most profound of all. Shift from your product design to service and experience design. LEGO survived not just by making little plastic toys, but by providing an entire educational, community-driven, and entertainment experience. And hey, if you need proof that this strategy continues to pay off today, just consider this staggering figure, 15.7 billion Danish kroner. That was LEGO's revenue for just the first half of 2020. Even during a time of massive global uncertainty, their revenue still increased by 7% compared to the previous year, and consumer sales grew by 14%. Their online platform became this incredible digital hub for fans worldwide, basically proving the enduring, modern-day resilience of their strategic playbook. Which brings us to our final provocative thought to leave you with today. LEGO learned the hard way that when you try to be everything to everyone, you kind of lose who you are. But by stripping away the excess, they found their foundation again. So, in a world of endless digital distractions and this constant pressure to diversify, I challenge you to ask yourself, what is your brand's core brick? What is the fundamental, uncompromising value that you offer? Find it, build upon it, and honestly, the possibilities are limitless. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.